It's 3:33 a.m. on April 1st, 2022. A home security camera records the inside of a high-rise apartment in Hanoi. The room is dim, quiet, and still. A father sits on the couch, staring at his phone. Just a few feet away, his son stands by the desk. The boy doesn't say much. He barely moves. But then, his father starts to speak. He begins raising his voice, yelling at his son about school, about studying, about expectations. And then, it happens. No sound, no warning. Just one final movement, captured in full. And the horror isn't just what happened that night. It's that the entire thing was recorded. The boy from the recording, known only as L.N.N.M, was a 16-year-old biology student at the Amsterdam High School for the Gifted in Hanoi. He lived with his father on the 28th floor of the Van Phu Victoria apartment complex, a modern high-rise in Hanoi's Ha Dong district. His school was one of the most competitive in the country. Entry was difficult. Expectations were higher. Students were pushed to perform, and falling behind wasn't an option. For many students, that pressure didn't stop once classes ended. It followed them home. As a result, L.N.N.M suffered from depression. Over time, he started to pull away. He spoke less, kept to himself. But in the early hours of April 1st, the pressure reached a breaking point. At 3:37 a.m, a home camera inside the Van Phu Victoria complex quietly captured a moment between a father and his son. The apartment was still. The father sat on the sofa. His son stood nearby, facing the desk. He's being ordered to complete a homework assignment. It was well past midnight, and the boy hadn't completed them. He was now being scolded, not just for failing to do the work, but for what that failure represented. Falling behind, not trying hard enough, letting expectations slip. The boy didn't respond. He didn't argue. He stood in silence, absorbing the weight of every word. Then, calmly, he stepped outside. He told his father to read the letter left on the table. The father picked up the note and began reading. "I'm so sorry for the impulsive behavior I will and have done. Really, life is too tiring. It's not an outburst of anger. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time, just out of regret. It's a pity that thoughts like these come with regret. Regret for the friends and games that were left behind. How many songs have gone unheard? It's not that my life is miserable. It may just be that I'm too negative. But no matter what, the result is still the same. This is probably no one's fault but mine. Let's talk quickly. Condolences to Tu, because he will have to suffer more from his mother's temper. Mum is very caring, but is always doing the wrong thing, always overdoing it, and gradually loses sight of the benefit of sharing when her opinion is not really important. Hi Dad, a person who is hot-tempered, less interested, less involved, but you always try to look like you understand when you're working. That's it. No layout, nothing fancy, but these must be the lines of goodbye. Today is also April Fool's. Life itself is such a joke." L.N.N.M, consumed by the pressure he could no longer carry, jumped 28 floors to his death. His father sprinted to the balcony, but it was too late. He paused just long enough to understand what had happened, then ran off camera. The recording doesn't follow, but the screams echo from outside the frame. Doors opening, people crying. The camera keeps running as family members come into view, breaking down in real time over what he's just done. Clips of the incident, along with images of the boy's death note, were quickly shared across Vietnamese social media. On forums and in group chats, The video spread rapidly, gaining hundreds of thousands of interactions. Even some news sites began quoting lines from the letter and including frames from the recording in their coverage. Across the country, parents and teachers began speaking more openly about academic pressure. Articles pointed to how easily it can overwhelm students, especially in homes where success is treated as a measurement of worth. One publication urged parents to stop treating their children like trophies. Another wrote that the real issue wasn't just stress, but how few people take a child's mental health seriously until it's too late. In 2022, ActionAid Vietnam published a mental health survey of students, teachers, and parents. Nearly half said strict parenting and pressure to succeed were harming their mental health. A separate report from the Ministry of Health found that more than 3 million children in Vietnam were struggling with mental illness. Anxiety, depression, loneliness, and burnout were the most common issues. Every year, the number of young people seeking treatment for stress increases by up to 25%. Despite this, many parents still refuse to accept that their children can suffer in the same way adults do. Some blame laziness. Others ignore the signs entirely. And so, it keeps happening. Another student, another family, another moment like this.
We'll return after these messages.
Privacy online is more important than ever. Whether you're browsing, streaming, or just trying to keep your data secure, your information is constantly being tracked. That's where today's sponsor, Private Internet Access, comes in. I use PIA because I spend a lot of time researching some sketchy corners of the internet, and I need to know my connection's secure. But it's also great for streaming. Since I'm in the UK, I can connect to a US server and unlock content I wouldn't normally have access to. And if you're in the US, you can do the same. Want to watch Friends on Netflix? Just switch to a UK server. Without a VPN, it's like paying for a Michelin star meal and only getting the kids' menu. With PIA, you get access to the full spread. It works on Windows, Mac, Android, iOS, even Linux, and one subscription covers unlimited devices. Right now, you can get 83% off, bringing it down to just $2.03 a month, plus 4 extra months for free. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's zero risk in trying it out. Click the link in the description to get started, and thanks to PIA for sponsoring this video. CCTV cameras around Ipswich quietly recorded a young couple as they moved through the city. They stopped at a pub, went shopping for an Xbox, took the bus into town, and every time they were pushing a buggy. There's nothing unusual about the footage. They smile, they talk, they joke, just a couple going about their day. They would spend the next 3 days carrying on as if nothing had happened. But something had, and what that something was would only come to light once it was far too late. Before it all happened, there were just 2 people who used to know each other. Chelsea Gleeson Mitchell was 24. She had a background in childcare, a quiet life in Bedfordshire. Then she met Scott Jeff. The relationship lasted 3 months. She said he introduced her to drugs, cannabis, cocaine, ecstasy, and that was enough for her to leave. Later that year, she met someone new. His name was Thomas Wilden. Within weeks, she was pregnant. Their daughter, Isabella, was born in 2020. For a while, things were stable. But by April 2023, the relationship between Chelsea and Thomas had broken down. She accused him of domestic abuse, though later admitted the claims were false. Still, it was enough to trigger involvement from Children's Services. She was assigned a domestic violence advocate and told she could access temporary housing. But there was a condition. Her new partner wouldn't be allowed to live there, as by that point, she was back with Jeff. They'd reconnected in a park. It was the first time he met Isabella. He decided on the spot that she must be his. Jeff began taking over Isabella's care, and that's when things got worse. They booked a weekend in Great Yarmouth, but when the time came to leave, they didn't. According to Chelsea, Isabella liked being near the sea, so they stayed. They moved from hotels to a caravan until by June 12th, they had run out of money. Messages were sent to friends and family asking for help. When nothing came through, they bought a tent and started sleeping on the beach at Caister-on-Sea. They told councils they were fleeing violence, that Isabella's father had been abusive. It wasn't true, but it helped them get support. By the end of that weekend, they were relocated again. Temporary accommodation was arranged in Ipswich. They arrived on Monday, June 19th. During this time, Isabella started turning up with bruises, yellow marks on her cheeks, scratches on her hands and arms. According to Chelsea, Jeff became violent during potty training. If Isabella had an accident, he punished her. He taught her to repeat lines about her biological father, told her what to say, what not to say. They wrapped her in jackets and sunglasses to hide the injuries. She was left alone for long periods, and every time someone raised concern, they packed up and moved somewhere new. By the time they arrived in Ipswich, Isabella had already suffered multiple fractures. Her arms were broken, her pelvis was described as shattered, and it was only going to get worse. By the evening of June 26th, Isabella's body had already begun to fail. The couple didn't call for help. They didn't take her to a hospital. 7 days after their arrival, Isabella Jonas Wilden was dead. She was just 2 years old. The official cause of death was a bone marrow embolism. Trauma from a heavy impact had forced marrow into her bloodstream. It travelled to her lungs and shut them down from the inside. 30 minutes later, following Isabella's death, CCTV captured the couple leaving their flat. They were spotted at a nearby shop, smiling, picking up snacks, laughing like nothing had happened. Over the next 3 days, Isabella's body was pushed around Ipswich in a buggy. The couple got on buses, bought an Xbox, ate at McDonald's, visited a pub. At one point, Jeff even placed a shopping bag on top of her. It wasn't until June 30th that someone else found out. Gleason Mitchell had been speaking online with a friend named Joanne Gardner. She told her Isabella had been dead in the pushchair for around 3 days. Gardner called the police. 10 minutes later, the couple left the flat and headed to Ipswich train station. They boarded a train to Bury St Edmunds and ended up at the Corn Exchange pub. Photos were later taken of Gleason Mitchell. She was smiling, drinking. Isabella's body had been left behind. After Isabella's death, Scott Jeff started searching for a way out. His phone showed queries for flights to Scotland, trains to Amsterdam, and whether a passport was needed. During the trial, it was revealed he'd also asked Gleason Mitchell to buy a shovel. On July 1st, they were arrested in Bury St Edmunds. Police had already found Isabella's body locked in the bathroom of the flat. Both were charged with murder, and later with 2 counts of child cruelty, after tests found traces of cocaine and cannabis in Isabella's system. Analysis of Jeff's phone uncovered videos he had filmed of Isabella. In them, he's seen shouting at her until she cries. Gleason Mitchell sits nearby. She doesn't say anything. At one point, she laughs. In interviews, they each blamed the other. Both denied murder, but the jury was told that only one of them could be responsible for causing the fatal injuries. In the end, they found Jeff guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 26 years. Gleason Mitchell was sentenced to 10 years for allowing the death of a child and 2 counts of child cruelty. For 3 days, they pushed Isabella's lifeless body through the streets of Ipswich, to the shops, on buses, past security cameras. In every frame, they acted like a family. They smiled, they joked, they played the part. All while the child they were pretending to care for was already gone. It's April 8th, 2025. Footage from inside a nightclub captures a crowd dancing the night away. A live performance by Ruby Perez is underway. His voice carries over the speakers as people raise their phones, panning across the room. Drinks in hand, lights flashing, nothing unusual. Then the footage jolts, screams, panic, and then silence. By morning, what had taken place inside that building would be known across the country, and what the footage captured would be remembered as part of one of the deadliest non-natural disasters in its history. Jet Set opened in 1973 as a movie theatre. 2 decades later, it was converted into a nightclub. With its open-plan layout and double-height ceilings, it became one of the most recognizable venues in Santo Domingo. On paper, it could hold up to 1,000 people standing, 700 seated. Monday nights were known for live music, often drawing in high-profile guests. Behind the scenes, the owner said repairs were made regularly. Plasterboard would occasionally fall from the ceiling during storms or when water leaked from the AC. Tiles were replaced as and when necessary, and waterproofing was done every few years. The last round had been finished just weeks earlier, and on the day of the concert, new panels were installed in the roof. No one had ever reviewed the weight being stored up top. No engineers were called to inspect the structure. There were no formal assessments of the ceiling's integrity. And so, that Monday night on April 8th inside Jet Set was like any other. People crowded toward the front of the stage. Tables were full. Ruby Perez was just over an hour into his set. People dancing in place, some filming, others holding drinks above their heads to avoid the sway of the crowd. Just past 12:40 a.m., the music kept going. So did the lights. Everything looked normal, until it didn't. In the silence that followed, it was unclear what had happened. No warning, no sound of cracking, just a sudden collapse. The entire ceiling had fallen into the crowd below, pulling steel, concrete, and lighting rigs down with it. Some who were trapped managed to call for help from beneath the rubble. Over 100 calls came through to emergency services. A few were made by people who couldn't move. By the time morning came, search and rescue crews had surrounded the building. There were hundreds of them, firefighters, military, paramedics, all working through the debris by hand, using thermal cameras and dogs to locate the missing. In total, more than 400 responders were deployed to the site. For the first few hours, people were still being pulled out alive. Some had called their families, others had shouted to rescuers through cracks in the rubble. But by 3 p.m., that stopped. No more survivors were found after that point. As night fell, officials halted updates until the next day. Families had asked for silence. Emergency services documented more than 130 ambulance transfers. The real number was higher. Some trips carried multiple people at once, with some hospitals reporting over 200 injuries. By April 9th, the focus shifted from rescue to recovery. International teams arrived the same day. Crews from Israel, Puerto Rico, Mexico. By April 12th, all of the dead had been identified. In total, 235 people were killed and 225 more injured. A 3-day period of mourning was declared. Flags were lowered to half-mast. Public events were cancelled. The Senate suspended all scheduled sessions. An investigation was announced almost immediately. A commission made up of both national and international experts was assembled to determine what had gone wrong. That report is expected to take months. The footage from that night doesn't show the history of the building. It doesn't show the water damage or the ceiling panels that fell in the years before. It only shows the final minutes, the music, the crowd, the moment everything gave way. The warning signs weren't invisible. They were ignored. And what was captured that night is the result. One of the worst disasters in the country's history, and one of the darkest moments ever caught on camera. The stream had been running for just over an hour. He was live, on camera, talking with friends. They'd just wrapped up a round of Escape from Tarkov, a multiplayer first-person shooter video game, and were getting ready to jump into the next one. Then, he went quiet. Not just in-game, completely. At first, no one said anything. They thought he'd muted himself, maybe stepped away. But he hadn't. Something had gone horribly wrong, and the live stream was capturing every second of it. Very little is known about OfseT. His name was Alexei. He was 49 years old and lived in the city of Shyolkovo, just outside Moscow. And according to his VK profile, he'd been streaming for years. He used to play a game called Crossout. More recently, he'd started branching out, trying different titles, old and new. But Escape from Tarkov was one of his favorites. That day was nothing unusual. He was live, speaking with friends, and had just under 1,000 people watching. They'd finished a round and were gearing up for the next one. Then, out of nowhere, Alexei said he wasn't feeling well. He raised his hand to his head, as if trying to shake something off. And then, without warning, he collapsed. His body began to slump forward in the chair. It happened slowly, but no one on the stream realized what they were seeing. Even his teammates kept talking, not understanding what was going on. In the background, a child can be heard crying. It's unclear if they were in the same room, or had just walked in. But no one stepped in to help. Alexei had lost consciousness, and the longer he stayed still, the clearer it became that something was wrong. He was dying, on stream, and no one in the house had noticed. The broadcast kept going. Nearly an hour passed before viewers managed to get his relatives' contact details. Some of them tried to reach out to his family members and let them know what was happening. Eventually, someone got through. His relatives were told. An ambulance was called. But by the time they arrived, Alexei was already dead. And the stream was still live. An hour and a half in, a woman entered the room. Someone older, likely his mother. She didn't understand what had happened. She touched his shoulder, tried to lift his head, told him he was warm. She didn't want to believe it, and she didn't want to let him go. The exact cause of death was never confirmed. Some believe it may have been a stroke. Others think it was an aneurysm, something deep inside the brain that gave way without warning. He didn't clutch his chest. There was no sign of pain in his jaw, just a sudden shift, a hand to his head, and then silence. From that moment on, his body began to shut down. The way his neck stiffened, the way he started breathing. It all happened fast, too fast for anyone around him to respond. Later, his daughter Anastasia confirmed the news on his VK page. But by then, hundreds of people had already seen it unfold in real time. They watched the signs, the confusion, the stillness. And the more they watched, the more helpless it became. He was doing something he loved, talking with friends, getting ready for another game. But what the live stream would become was someone's final moments, caught on camera and witnessed live by hundreds of people who could do nothing but watch.